Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to be ranking all of the character taunts in MultiVersus, including any that launched with Season 3. Unlike with idle and parry animations, which I've already ranked and you should definitely check out, in some instances, taunts actually are affected by character variants, but these exceptions are few and far enough between where I will only mention them when appropriate. I'll be grading the taunts based on the following categories. Character representation. Does this reference anything in the character's franchise? Is this something the character would actually do? Secondly, visual appeal. How enjoyable is it to watch the taunt? Does it make sense as a taunt, either through comedic effect or provocation? Thirdly, distinctiveness. How unique is the taunt? Is this animation used elsewhere in the game, and do other characters do similar things? Value. How much does this taunt cost? Was it included in the season pass? To avoid overcomplicating this, I am ignoring any store bundles or pre-release season passes. I do believe taunts are overpriced in general, but I will try my best to avoid letting my issues with the Gleamium system impede on my ranking. I will then give an overall grade based on these categories. I'll be presenting the characters in alphabetical order and the taunts themselves in the order they appear for me in the menus. As always, please keep in mind that this is all just my subjective opinion, and I would love to know what your favorite and least favorite taunts are in the comments. I've been floored by how much love and discussion the previous two MultiVersus videos got, and I just quickly want to express how grateful I am for each and every one of you. Seriously, thank you. We're starting things off not very strongly here. Agent Smith's default is terrible, with the only saving grace being that it is free, but charging anything for such a visually dull and basic taunt would be criminal. Dance of the Spoons is a clever reference to the use of spoons in the Matrix franchise, and visually speaking, this has great variety and appeal. However, I understand it's meant to be very comedic, but I just don't think this one works for Agent Smith, and I definitely don't think it's worth 1,000 Gleamium. Aristarch's default is decent. It has some great fluidity in its animation and works well enough for the character, but this animation is reused as a victory animation and just doesn't work very well as a taunt. Stark's laugh is irritating, as the voiceover does not sync at all with the animation. This does, however, work well for the character and as a taunt, and I do also believe it's fairly priced. Yawning definitely works as a taunt, even if it lacks some visual variety. This works well for Stark, and is again pretty fairly priced within the Gleamium system. Stark's new taunt does a much better job at representing her character than her others, by demonstrating her slyness and egotism through the deception of honor. This is a solid new addition to the taunts library, even if it doesn't give much variety. Banana Guard's default is charming, but it is also his lobby animation, so the charm of the hello quickly wears off through repetition. While this is more so referencing Banana Guard being a banana, rather than actually representing his character or Adventure Time, this still works really well. Visually speaking, it is a joy to watch, and although there are many dance taunts in the game, as we will see, the maracas definitely help in letting this one stand out. It is on the more pricey side, but I believe this one earns its higher price tag. Marmoset, on the other hand, does not do a good enough job of standing out amongst the dance emotes. It is, however, cheaper, and it still works for the character, despite not being a reference beyond the name itself. Batman's default is a visual bore. Yes, brooding definitely works for the character, and it is a unique animation, but it just doesn't stand out at all. Utility Belt is a perfect example of comedically representing a serious character. This emote is amazing and has a very reasonable price tag while greatly standing out and being a visual treat. Accidental Bomb does everything just as well, with its comedic yet accurate representation of the character while providing visual interest and unique personality. Beetlejuice's default emote is one of the worst in the game. It fails in every way, especially with a character as crazy and wacky as Beetlejuice. Luckily, Beetlejuice has just been given a new taunt, and while it's just another dancing taunt, it's infused with that signature strangeness that we expect from Beetlejuice. However, it is definitely not worth the excessive price of 1,000 Gleamium. Black Adam's default is okay, with some visual appeal, but it is a reused animation and doesn't do much at all to stand out or represent Black Adam's character in any special way. Entertained Yet is a fun reference to Gladiator and works well as a taunt and for Black Adam's character. However, it doesn't stand out much amongst the crowd, and it is very expensive for what it is. Luckily, it was included in the season pass. Thumbs Down is a great reference to Greek history, and the mythology of which is where his powers were originally derived from, before Black Adam seeks his power from the gods of ancient Egypt. This also just works really well as a taunt, even if it isn't very visually interesting or super unique. Bugs' default is a direct reference to What's Cooking Doc, and it's much more visually interesting than a lot of defaults in the game. It is, however, a reused animation. Tap Dance is also a direct reference to a Looney Tunes cartoon, Bugs Bunny Rides Again. Visually speaking, this is a great dancing animation, but it fails to stand out as a dance animation, and it is just not worth 500 Gleamium. While not a direct reference, Toodles Doc does really work for Bugs Bunny, even if it doesn't stand out given its similarities to other taunts. And much like with Entertained Yet, I don't believe this one's worth the price tag, but it was included in the season pass. Tease does most things right. It is very fitting for Bugs, has some fantastic animation, and is very cheap for how good it is. However, other characters have very similar taunts, despite Bugs' being a very good version of the teasing taunt. Finn's default presents Finn's adventurous spirit well, but visually it is not the most interesting, but it does work as a nice declaration of victory. It is, however, a reused animation, making this a decent default, but nothing special. Chest Pound is a great reference to Adventure Time's pilot, and Finn's screaming really makes this work as a comedic taunt. It was also included in the season pass, but it is also just fairly priced. It just isn't as visually interesting as other S-rank taunts, so it falls into A here. Baby Dance is an amazing dancing emote. It is a direct reference to the episode Memory of a Memory, and Finn's happy demeanor just makes this so visually charming. It is also very reasonably priced. Perhaps I'm being too generous with this one, but I really adore it. Garnet's default references the episode When It Rains, but just doesn't work as a taunt, and it's a reused animation. It's not bad, it's just not anything special. Not only is this a direct reference to the episode So Many Birthdays, but this is one of the most unique taunts in the game. Its visual and comedic charms easily make up for it not really being provocative. While it is one of the more expensive taunts, I believe this one earns its price tag and could have even gotten away with being a legendary taunt, which is not something I would say about many taunts in the game at all. Garnet's dance is a direct reference to the episode Reunited, and it is one of the more interesting dances. It just doesn't stand out in any special ways compared to other dance emotes. Mad 'Cause You're Single is a direct reference to the episode Jailbreak, and while it works as a taunt, it suffers from one fatal issue. It is the only emote in the game to cost prestige, and simply does not do anything to warrant costing 22,500 prestige. Gizmo's default is horrible. It does so little to do anything interesting regarding both representing Gizmo and the Gremlins franchise, and in just being visually interesting. It makes zero sense as a taunt, and it's also a reused animation. This one is the Murphy's Law of taunts. Flight of Fancy does a good job of representing Gizmo's playfulness, and it definitely stands out as a unique taunt, but doesn't really make sense as one. I do think it's just about worth the more expensive price tag though. Gizmo's dance is a direct reference to Gremlins 2, and while very charming, it is just another dance taunt and does very little to stand out. Umbrella is a clever reference to Gizmo's weakness to water, but it makes zero sense as a taunt, and it's just not visually interesting for me. It is fairly priced though, even if I personally wouldn't buy it. Harley's default is the definition of it's not bad, and it definitely works as a taunt and for Harley, but it just does so little to be interesting or unique. Mallet Pose is playful and fun, and is one of the cheapest taunts with some nice animation and distinct visuals. It's a good taunt, nothing outstanding, and doesn't really do much taunting, but it's fun. Bye Bye works very well as a taunt, infuriatingly so. It doesn't do a whole lot to stand out, but this is again a very solid taunt for Harley. Iron Giant's default is so charming simply due to the high. However, it is very visually dull and it is a reused animation. The charm of the giant can only go so far in this instance. Tease is a very nice reference to an interaction between the Iron Giant and Hogarth and works very well as a taunt. However, much like Bugs' tease, it misses out in the S rank for just not being the most unique. Back Scratcher is an odd one. While very unique, it's one of the longest animations in the game, making it actually difficult to use during a game, and it just doesn't work as a taunt either. It definitely has its visual charms, and I think it only just justifies its price tag. It's pretty good, but I just think some things hold it back. Jake's default is pretty good, with a nice use of Jake's personality and powers, but it is a reused animation. Jake's dance is a direct reference to the episode Power Animal, and is a visual treat even if it doesn't do much to stand out amongst the other dances. It is, however, very well priced. Ballet is a direct reference to the episode The Jiggler, and is definitely one of the more visually interesting dances. I especially love the ending jazz hands. However, it is just not worth 500 Gleamium. Jason's default is horrible, and it is only saved from an F rank because it does a decent enough job of representing horror tropes and Jason's character. It can be argued that this one is intimidating, but it is too visually boring for me to give it any credit for this. And it is a reused animation, which of course never helps. I was very surprised to read that Moonwalk is actually a direct reference to a bug in the 2017 Friday the 13th game where Jason would walk backwards in a moonwalk fashion. This is one of the funniest taunts in the game simply due to the juxtaposition it puts on display. Jason would obviously never do a Michael Jackson dance, but I really like the reference here, and it was also included in the Season 1 pass. LeBron's default is very meh. It works for his character, but it's a visual bore and does very little to stand out. Silencer is a fantastic reference to a real taunt LeBron James does during basketball games, and it's a visual delight. This one just misses out in the S rank due to not doing enough to stand out amongst other taunts. It is arguably just a more visually interesting dance animation. Much like Moonwalk, I was surprised to read that the salsa dance is actually a direct reference to a Mountain Dew commercial that LeBron starred in. It is a good dance animation, but again, it just doesn't do enough to stand out given how many dancing taunts are in the game. It is also too expensive for what it is in my opinion. LeBron's new taunt is comedic in such a unique way. It shows LeBron signing his basketball, presumably for children, yet he then just refuses to give away the basketball. I know this isn't the point of the taunt, but this element of comedy makes this so much better. Marvin's default is disgraceful and does nothing to be interesting, unique, or representative of the character. I paid nothing for this and I still want my money back. Helmet Shake pokes fun at the conventional trope of cartoon characters being able to pull objects seemingly out of nowhere. This one visually is very interesting, but I hate the fact that the trumpet and the flag just randomly disappear. It really takes away from the visuals for me and seriously holds this one back from a very high rank. Flag is so simple yet so charming. It does so much right and does just enough comedically to stand out in the crowd. Marvin, you so rarely fail to make me laugh out loud. Morty has a very good default taunt, which references the episode Raising Gazorpazorp. The only thing really holding this one back is the fact that it's also Morty's victory animation. Listening is a weird one for me. I really do love this one, but I just don't believe it's worth 500 Gleamium. It is a direct reference to Rick Mancing the Stone and works perfectly as a taunt. Maybe I'm just being too harsh on this one, but I just don't think it's worth the price. Head Bent Over is a direct reference to Get Swifty, but at the end of the day, it is just another dance taunt and doesn't do much to stand out, but it is charming enough. Our newest fighter, or fighters, the Powerpuff Girls. Unfortunately, their default taunt is really dull and really doesn't even work as a taunt. This is a very disappointing new addition. Their other taunt, however, is much better, as the girls become distracted by coloring books to care about whatever fight you're putting up. This is a very wholesome and charming taunt, and an excellent new addition. It's always hard to judge Rendog as he is a completely original character. His default is okay, it's cute and charming, but it doesn't do anything unique or interesting, and it is a reused animation. Yawn is a very awkward one. It's very short and not interesting at all, even compared to other yawning or sleeping animations. It's one of the cheapest taunts, and yet I still feel it struggles to justify this price. Tail Wag does a great job of presenting Rendog as cute and cheeky, but it struggles greatly to do much else in terms of standing out. It is, however, one of the cheapest, and it does justify this price. Portal Moon infuriates me, but I'll try not to be too harsh here, because it does do some things right. This is the only taunt that I believe actually misrepresents the character, and in this case it's through inaccuracy. Rick's portals aren't transparent, they never have been, so I don't understand why you can see through this portal. The taunt also just doesn't make sense here. Rick enters a portal and then sticks his ass through the portal, but then just exits the portal and stays where he is? What's the point of the portal here except for visual variety? The taunt originally didn't even have the portal, and I think it was so much better back then. It is visually interesting, and look, it does work as a taunt, and it's definitely something Rick would do, but this is also Rick's victory animation, which again, never helps. Get Swifty directly references the episode of the same name, and it is visually interesting. The mic prop is a very nice touch. It does little else, however, to stand out from other dance taunts, and I feel like a broken record with these dance taunts, but unfortunately there is just so many. Jack's default is actually a reference to the 7th episode of Season 5, but beyond this, there is very little worth noting about this one, and it is a reused animation. Samurai Shuffle is my favorite dance taunt in the game, and it directly references the episode Jack, the Monks, and the Ancient Master's Son. It is also infuriating to be taunted with this, which is kind of the point. It's both very comedic and provocative. Samurai Jack has just received a new taunt, and it's fantastic. Now Shaggy is no longer the only one that can change his appearance mid-game, as the blindfold will remain on until Jack is wrung out. For some variants though, this simply doesn't work, making it a huge waste of money if you pay for it. At least it's cheaper than Shirt Rip though. Shaggy's default works perfectly for the character, given it acts as an anti-taunt, given it shows that Shaggy is instead scared of you. It is, however, a reused animation, which holds this one back, but it is one of my favorite defaults. Kung Fu was hard to judge. It works for Ultra Instinct Shaggy, but not Shaggy. It's hard to sort of pinpoint how well this is representing the character here. Regardless, it isn't very visually interesting or unique. It does work as a taunt, and I do think it's worth the price tag though. Just like Jack's blindfold, Shirt Rip is directly affected by your character variant. The animation will still play, but Shaggy's default appearance seems to be the only one that actually loses his shirt. It's hard to judge this one given the appeal of how Shaggy will visually look different for the remainder of his stock, but some variants simply just lose this entire appeal, making it a huge waste of money, and this taunt is more expensive than blindfold as well, making it even harder to judge. Honestly, out of the entire game, I struggled the most with rating this one. Nunchucks perfectly combines the characteristics of both Shaggy and Ultra Instinct Shaggy, while also being both provocative and comedic. However, this is another reused animation, which is very disappointing. Shaggy has the most reused animations regarding his taunts, which is a real shame given my love for his character and for Scooby-Doo in general. Steven's default is exceptionally charming and appealing. It nicely references an aspect of Steven's character, but this is also Steven's entrance animation. It also doesn't really make much sense as a taunt. Share the Love is just boring and does very little to be interesting or to even represent Steven in any meaningful way. Perhaps I'm being too harsh on this one, but I'm just simply not a fan. Wipe Gem is really weird. I really dislike this one, and it doesn't make sense as a taunt whatsoever, and what exactly is this demonstrating about Steven's character? It's at least somewhat unique, but again, I just think this one is weird. Starstruck references the title sequence of Steven Universe, and I personally love doing this in 2v2s to show my admiration for my teammate. This one isn't the most visually interesting or unique, but it is charming and cheap enough to earn it a B+. Much like Jason's default, Stripe's default is only spared from the F rank because it somewhat represents the character well. Beyond that, there is nothing good to say here. Not only are most of the defaults reused animations, but a lot of them simply aren't good at all. Puppets, on the other hand, gets everything right. It nails Stripe's character, is one of the most unique and visually fun taunts, and it is very weirdly priced. I'm very shocked this isn't at least an epic taunt. No complaints from me though. Superman's default is horrendous. It does very little to be interesting or to even represent Superman beyond he's very strong. It does make sense as a taunt at least, but not enough to spare it from the F rank. Superman's other two taunts, however, are fantastic. Hover is such a comedic middle finger to your opponent and really works for Superman's character, while also being great bang for your buck. Push-ups is also a very fun taunt that utilizes Superman's powers in a comedic and interesting way. While more expensive, I still believe this one earns its price tag. Two great taunts that more than make up for his default. Taz's default is very similar to Gizmo Marvin's. Barely anything is happening here, and it's an extremely lazy excuse for a taunt, even if it is free. Tasty Tantrum is held back only by its insane price of 1,000 Gleamium, which is just too much to ask even for such a fun and unique taunt. She-Devil Howl is a direct reference to the Looney Tunes short Bedeviled Rabbit, and it works well enough as a taunt, but it just isn't very visually interesting or unique. It is fairly priced at least, but I'd argue it's more so worth an uncommon price tag. Taz Hungry, while not the most visually striking, is just such a fun taunt that really works for this character, and as a taunt in general. I definitely think this one earns its price tag. The Joker's default is one of the best defaults in my opinion, and makes great use of the character. However, yet again, it is held back by the fact that it's a reused animation. It really is a shame how many taunts are taken from other parts of the game. Or perhaps, as players, are we just expecting too much? Ready for Showtime simply does not work visually for some variants, and with an asking price of 500 Gleamium, it becomes difficult to praise despite working for the character and being pretty unique. Overall, I really expected better for the Joker given the potential of his character. Tom and Jerry have my favorite default, and if it wasn't their lobby animation, this could be an S. I love this spy versus spy element here, agreeing to team up while still plotting against the other. Hurt Toe is just a visual goldmine. I especially love Jerry looking to the player like, check this shit out. Much like Shaggy's default, this one really works as an anti-taunt, demonstrating the dysfunctional nature of this supposed partnership. They aren't fighting you, they're fighting each other. You're simply collateral damage. Nap Time may be just another yawn/sleep animation, but it stands out because it utilizes that Tom and Jerry charm so perfectly. They fall asleep so cutely here, but even in a moment of supposed rest, these two are still keeping a watchful and distrusting eye on the other. Velma's default certainly works as a taunt, but it's just so boring for me. There just isn't much here worth noting. Reading is a very good taunt and uses Velma's character cleverly and in a provocative way. She's much more interested in her studies than in anything you have to offer. It isn't the most visually flashy, and that really is the only thing holding this one back from an S rank. Crime Sting Investigation is a good taunt, and I'm sure this is probably someone's favorite. It's probably worth a higher rank than what I'm giving it here, but I personally just don't like this one. It does a lot right, but it's just not worth the price tag for me, and I don't think it works comedically or provocatively. She isn't saying you stink, but rather just the chemical she's holding does. It is unique, I'll give it that at least, but I just don't think it works. Velma's Dance is a very lovely direct reference to Scooby's night with a frozen fright, but as I've said over and over, this one just doesn't stand out as a dance animation. The dance taunts are all very good, and dancing definitely works as a taunt, but given that dancing makes up such a large portion of the taunts, it definitely becomes repetitive as we've seen. Like Jason and Stripe, Wonder Woman's default is spared an F rank only because it does a decent job at representing her character, but there really is nothing of note here beyond that. And finally, we end on a high with weightlifting, which does a great job of using Wonder Woman's powers in a taunting and comedic way. The yawn is also a very good touch. And there we have it. Finally, we've made it to the end. All emotes have been graded. So there are my favourites and my least favourites. But what are yours? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments below. Have a good one, guys. Thank you all so very much for the love and support. Genuinely, I can't even begin to express how much it's meant to me. Just, yeah, I'm absolutely mind blown and I couldn't be happier. Every comment, every like, every view, like it just means the world to me, and I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing and hope you enjoy what comes out. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. Share to Love is just boring and does very little to be interesting. Share to Love is just boring and does very little to be interesting. Oh my gosh. Share the Love is just boring and does very little to be interesting. Oh my gosh. Share the Love is just boring and does very little to be interesting. Why can't I say that word? Share the Love is just... Fuck. Fuck's sake. Oh, now I really can't say it. Shit. Fuck's sake. Share the Love is just boring and does very little to be interesting or to even... Fuck, I got it right and I still fucked it up.